Hi, so today I'm going to be talking about how to add a little bit more appeal to your figure drawings. Hi, my name is Luis Escobar. I'm a storyboard artist on the Simpsons television show. I've been working on the show for over 25 years now, and I'm here to empower you. So I was thinking about figure drawing, and one of the things that happened to me when I was learning to become more consistent with my figure drawings is that I got to the point where I understood that I needed to have construction and volume and energy and and so I would draw these figure drawings, and they would have solidity, they would have structure, uh, but they were ugly, and I didn't know what to do about. I mean, in spite, I mean, they were solid drawings, but they looked kind of ugly, and I didn't know what to do about it. Like I didn't know how to make it so that they had a little bit more appeal, a little bit more finesse, a little bit more something. It was missing something. So it wasn't until years later when I went into a Riley School type figure drawing class where it kind of was all about making your figures pretty, even to the point where it seemed to me that they were ignoring the structure and the volume and the anatomy and the solidity. So in a lot of ways, at first I rebelled against the notions and the things that were being taught because of the fact that it was so much about appeal, so much about stylization, so much about making the final drawing look pretty, that it seemed like nobody was really learning solidity and the very foundations that were required to draw like imaginative drawings, like the foundational stuff that helps you really solidify a drawing from the ground up, from the inside out. They were kind of drawing from the outside in. However, one time it got to the point where because I'm paying for these classes and because they were the only thing that I had for figure drawing, I ended up like giving up. I gave in to the thing. And what I discovered was that that it was the missing piece, that it was the thing that was missing from what I wanted out of my figures, which was an appeal that was lacking in my work. So I'm going to give you a handful of tips to get that final little hump. Like if you're really if you're finally gotten to the point where you're being solid, you're being structural, you understand anatomy, you understand the foundational stuff, you've learned the stuff from the inside out. I'm going to try to show you a little bit of the outside in stuff, the design stuff, the design principles, the finesse, the appeal, the prettiness stuff. So this is just a little bit of a video just about that, just some tips and tricks to make your stuff look a little prettier. But this does require a solid foundation to begin with. So let's get started. So today, I started already with the gesture if you in the lay-in. So I skipped this part of the drawing. I already did it. So I have a whole video just of that. I'm going to put a link in the description of this video to the video of doing lay-ins and doing gesture. Also, if you want to see the process in action in real time, I'm gonna also link to a few videos of me actually doing some 5 minutes and 2 minute figure drawings so that you can see the process. But then you'll also see me try to beautify the drawings even as I'm doing these sort of things. So this is what I'm thinking in those videos when I'm thinking about beauty and appeal and things like that. So I'm gonna put this in a completely different layer so that I can talk about these ideas So again, you do need a foundation and solidity and structure and anatomy already. You want to have that sort of thing ready to go, so that when you have this foundation, when you have the general lay-in, you can start working on adding a little bit more of appeal. So one of the things you want to think about, that's important, is line variation. Line variation, when we have our charcoal pencil and we're working on it with it, we want a little bit of line variation. We want not everything to be one thickness. We want it to be thick and thin and thick and thin. That sort of thing. That's kind of what we're looking for when we're doing some kind of final line on our work. Also, we're thinking about values and the simplicity of values. So first, line variation as far as thick and thin, right? Simplification also. So first, let's start with line variation and simplification all at once. So we're looking at something like this figure, and we're seeing that her anatomy, there's like all kinds of little lumpy, bumpy stuff. So lots of people that I know, that I admire, that they come from a different school than the Riley school. And when what they tend to do is that, for example, let's take this arm here, and then they would go in and they would just put in all the little bumps and make it look as organic as possible, and then they would just do these kind of lumpy kind of things that would just be, and that's fine. That's a look. That's a very organic, beautiful way of looking. It's just like the contour of a body, right? Where you're just kind of doing the contour, right? Okay. That's beautiful and that's great. However, like for example, in the Riley school, we were one of the things that sometimes you just don't have the time to just be there doing all the little wobblies, and also sometimes the wobblies get in the way. So what you want to do is to simplify as much as possible. So for example, these shoulders can be just very simple C curves. So C, it's just a C curve. Here is a C curve. And notice that I'm using the lay-in, and the lay-in is important because what you want to do is use the lay-in as part of your simplification, right? Here we have this arm, and this arm, if we're thinking about it going structurally that way, we could just very easily just add another C curve here. And then we can just make this a straight. And not add a whole lot of finesse. Here's another straight that we could add. Right there. Notice that it goes from thick to thin, right? So we're thinking about thick to thin, and we're also thinking about simplicity as simple as we can possibly make it. So we have this could be a straight. So we're thinking C curves, S curves, and straights. This is an S curve here, but we could just kind of simplify it and just make it a C curve going into this straight here. This can be a straight, so we're thinking straights, C curves, and S curves if the S curve is absolutely necessary. This could be a C curve, and here is some straight lines and another C curve. We want a little bit of a thick and thin going on here. C curve and a larger C curve. don't get too crazy here. You want to preserve as much of the lay-in as you possibly can, because the lay-in is the foundation on which you are doing all the work. Also, keep in mind that we want this sort of thing going on. So this leg wants to be longer, and then add a little bit of a corner here. The reason these are two straights together, and there's a definite like angle to this leg. We're doing this, right? Boom, straight, boom, boom, boom. This is a design thing. We're trying to avoid the Michelin Man muscles. One of the things that we want to do and then here, let me adjust this so you can see a little bit more of what so that it's a little bit more, it's a little shallower. It's a little straighter here on purpose. So we're simplifying everything, but notice that the lay-in is doing most of the work. All we're doing is so the lay-in is kind of like this foundation, and we want, like, say that there's an invisible line right through the lay-in, and we want any detail here and here to barely come out, so that these things are balanced, right? These two ends are as balanced as they possibly can in the details. Because what happens is if you're off and this stuff comes in and out, it starts to pinch. It starts to the very foundation and structure of your figure drawings will fall apart. You start pinching into the lay-in, and suddenly you've got a weird, unnatural human anatomy. So when you're doing the lay-in, you want to be as close as possible to the actual width of the limbs and the thickness of the limbs and the thickness of the torso and etc. So that when you add any anatomical details, the anatomy is well placed and balanced. And like I said, the lay-in is doing most of the work. So this is structurally going away from us like this, right? Mm-hmm. So we got to make sure that any details that we put on the outside kind of reinforce that. And that will happen with value as well. But at first, if you can do it with just the line work, that is ideal. And again, the line work should be thick and thin. And a good rule of thumb is that wherever the light is, usually thin on the top, dark on the bottom, because it kind of implies that the shadows are hitting on the bottom, right? We want to see this is kind of overlapping. And again, what will we do? Let's have a little bit of a straight here. A small C-curve. Simplification of the line. This is definitely a shallow C-curve, and this is almost a straight. So straights versus curves, not every line should be the same. It creates a dynamism. The line quality, the thick and thinness of the line quality also adds appeal and beauty. Straight, C-curve, and I think maybe not. I think it's better to do, I think that's the way it is. And then we could just add a little bit of a straight here. Okay, so talking about values as well. So I usually don't just do the line, the exterior lines this way. And I'm just gonna show you a little bit here about the structure that I'm thinking about, just so you can understand that I'm thinking about this stuff structurally too. Okay, but again, I'm not just thinking about the line quality on the outside of the figure, I'm also thinking about values. So that's one of the things that I'm not doing, that I'm not putting in right now. But I usually, if you look at my figure drawing sketches when I'm doing them really fast, I'm doing both the exterior and the interior all at the same time. That the values and the line work I'm doing all the time. I'm thinking about them all at once as a piece, because they're all connected. I could just go and and do just the values. Oh man, I'm doing all of this in the same layer. It's too bad. I could do that, just the values. And for example, if I just do this, and I just think about the values all on their own. Just think about, and again, the exact same C curve, S curve, straights. How can I just do, this is a C curve, and I'm thinking about these structurally. This is a C curve here, this is a C curve here structurally. This would be another C, straight. Just to change it up, here this wraps around. Structurally, this is straight. Follow this C curve. Follow this C curve. This is a hard, no, it's not a hard edge, it's just a C curve here. I'm also thinking about edges. C curve, C curve. This is a cast shadow, so I will make it straight as a symbol of the cast shadow. I could see how I haven't done any line work on this area, so I'll show you what I would do. If I don't have anything, I would just C curve this as if I did have a line work in there, and then like the C curve of the shadow, it also kind of works as my line work. This would be a cast shadow, so I would interpret it as a simple C curve of this head coming down and hitting that. Notice also that I don't have a line here for this bottom of the neck and chin area. I will come back to that later. Here I would just follow the same direction that I had already established for these the same design principles that I had already decided with the line work. So a lot of the times when I'm doing the shadows, I'm echoing what I will do with the outline. And then that way, because it's simplified, I could just very quickly darken all this stuff in. all of this is dark. I'm just drawing the, I was just drawing the general shape of the masses of the shadow here. And then I could come in, and actually this is a lost edge, so I could just not even worry about the edge of the face of the head there. I could just say that it's lost, that the shadows make it are lost in here. I could come in and do a hard an outline of these, so I could define it a little bit more if I want to, but now it's not really all that necessary because it's meant to be in shadow. I could come in here where in the areas of the light and just simplify a simple line. But again, simplicity and line variation, line design. So simple, thick and thin line work, and simplification or design of shadows and of body parts. How can I state this without the lumpy bumps? Just get the statement down as easy as or as clearly as possible without doing a ton of lumpy bumpy things. What is the clearest statement that is being made? And how can I make sure that the solidity that I want is happening? So let me add some of this close, because the close is adding some important structural information here. And here, these values here, they're fine, but one of the things that's missing here is a design even in the values. So what you want usually is a combination of soft edges and then firm edges and sharp hard edges, where it's soft and then it comes to an abrupt stop. So firm is midway through that in the soft, right? Like soft just goes and transitions very slowly, very nicely. I'm not doing a very good job here. I'm kind of fighting my tools, but the idea here is that there's a soft transition between the values, right? That's the idea. And then a firm edge is that it's a little bit more of it has a soft, it's dark in the center kind of and soft in the sides, while a soft edge just kind of transitions very slowly into nothing. And a hard edge usually has an abrupt stop somewhere. Usually it happens on cast shadows, but it also happens in areas, for example, like this cleavage, where there is there's a hard edge, abrupt stop between two forms. So this has shadow here, and then it goes into this. And simplification here of the head. C curve, S curve, And I could do a little C curve and a C curve for the shadow for the mouth. C curve for the undershadow of the ear. And then we want something as complicated as her hair. What we want is we want to simplify it. So let's see, C curve here, maybe a straight here. Notice now I'm taking artistic license just to make it interesting. Here's another C curve, but going this way, then C curve this way, straight, C curve. So none of those things exist in the actual model, but now I'm designing it so to add variation and dynamism to this. And then we want the shadow. So there's a shadow here and a shadow here. A little bit of a shadow there. Some here. And that's a firm edge right there. So all these decisions are just to pretty it up. Very simple, simplifying the anatomy. Here's a hard edge in the anatomy. Let's make sure that it's as hard as I can make it. And then it on this side is a little bit softer. But can you see that there's the bone is up in the surface, and it makes an abrupt transition between two planes. There's two forms overlapping, and it's very clear that they're overlapping. So I emphasize it by making a hard edge. It's a design choice, just to make it more, just to clarify it, to make it much more clear to the audience that there's an overlap. There's two overlapping forms there. And that would be it. That would be the drawing. Just that's how I'm thinking in order to beautify and try to stylize the drawing. So the importance is line variation, which is thick and thin. That's important. The simplification of the lines so that it's not super lumpy bumpy. You try to simplify the figure so that it's made out of the simplest of lines, straights and curves. So you could use both, and that's it. You could even use only straights, and you'll find that you can make curves by making small straights. It's a really good exercise to try to do that. It helps because for some reason, something about drawing everything in straights makes everything look more solid, but it also gives you a little bit more control. But C curves and straights, if you just simplify everything just to those two things, you add more dynamism to your drawing, and make sure that all the things are offset, and that not everything is a C curve, C curve, C curve, C curve all the time, because then it loses its structure. That's why when you do it all in straights, it actually reinforces the structure, which is very bizarre. But you want to do that, and make sure again to use your lay-in as the foundation. Don't go into your lay-in. Go always outside of your lay-in. Make sure that it's always the foundation on which you are drawing. Okay, so the lay-in is really important. That's why the very first thing that you should know is that's the most important thing. Values have the same thing. It's the same thing. Values you want to simplify for straights and C curves. So when you do a value or value line, you want to make it as simple as possible, C curve and a straight. But the extra element added to the value is that you either want to do a firm, hard, or soft edge, and you want to vary it because the same way that varying line it's all about variation. It's the same way with varying the line. The contrast adds interest. You want to vary the value types to add interest, and you want to do it in an informed way. So whenever two overlapping objects happen, you want to make sure to add that extra little hard edge so that it just gives it that pop of interest. Also, and the information for the viewer to understand what's happening. Also, when cast shadows, it's not an absolute because it depends on the type of light, but usually you want to put a little hard edge in for a cast shadow because it does break up the dynamism and it adds interest to the values. And it's a good little bit of a shortcut or a rule of thumb to do that. It just makes it that much simpler. That much simpler, not that much clearer. It's just a good kind of like a note taking thing. So you want to vary your line quality, your value types into two things, just like lines. In line work, you want C curves and S curves and straights. And S curves are just two C curves anyway. So straights and C curves. And then with values, you want the straights and C curves, and then firm, hard, and soft edges. So it's all about variation, and everything is in service to the structure that you understand, the anatomy that you understand, and make sure that your lay-in is absolutely dead on and makes sense, right? And let me add a little bit of structure and in here because I know that this is happening here. There. Okay, so those are my tips to add a little bit more appeal and dynamism to your final line work on your figure drawings. So I'd recommend you play around with these things, see how they work, so that when you end up doing a 5-minute sketch, a 3-minute sketch, a 2-minute sketch, a 1-minute sketch, you can. This becomes kind of second nature. This sort of like quick, and it also speeds up the fast sketches because if you're not noodling all the time. And doing all the little noodly things, and you just go C curve straight, C curve straight, C curve, shallow C curve, wider C curve, firm edge, soft edge, C curve, firm, that hard edge, and you're doing it really fast, and you're doing it speeds up the process. So those are my tips. Hopefully this has been helpful. And if you did find this content useful, please, I encourage you to support me on Patreon. Also, if you are interested in figure drawing and don't know where to begin, I do have a video course where I show you from absolutely nothing. Like if you don't know how to even draw a stick figure, I even go that far, and we start you off from the ground up. We don't assume that you know how to do anything. And then and I teach you all the fundamentals to start drawing, at least from your imagination, so that you can actually, by the end of the course, you can basically go into any art store, pick up a drawing book, and then take it from there. Right? A lot of the barrier to entry is the notion that you can't even draw if you don't have talent. So I help. You first dispel you from that notion, and second, I show you what is necessary so that you can just get the confidence so that you can start. Okay, so if that sounds interesting to you, there's a link to that course in the description of this video. I hope this has been helpful, and I will talk to you next time. All right.